Dinner: steaks, potatoes, fresh vegetables for the salad, a bottle of good red wine. Nothing extravagant, but not exactly frugal either. I wanted the evening to seem like a normal family dinner, not a display of my supposed plight. When I got home, I put the food in the refrigerator and wondered if I'd overdone the wine. Quinton was a real snob about alcohol and always criticized the choice of drinks. "It's practically vinegar, Owen," he'd say, even though he knew no more about wine than I knew about quantum physics. But I didn't care about his opinion today. One spent the rest of the day preparing for the visit and anticipating Elisa and Quentin's reaction when they saw my temporary home, and then their faces when I showed them pictures of my real new home. Yeah, I guess F.A. was right. I do have an incurable optimist inside of me and maybe a little vindictive. The morning was unexpectedly sunny for February. I stood at the window, with a cup of coffee, watching a neighbor boy ride his bike through the puddles left by yesterday's rain. His carefree laughter reminded me of Helvisa at the same age. Back then, she still liked to ride her bike with me through the park every Sunday. I looked at my watch. 2:00 in the afternoon. Elisa and Quinton had promised to be here by 6. 4 more hours until the meeting. I was both looking forward to and not looking forward to. The steaks are already marinating in the fridge. The potatoes are peeled, and I'll make the salad just before I arrive so it's as fresh as possible. The bottle of wine I bought yesterday sits on the kitchen table. It's a nice Merlot from the 2018 year vintage. Not that I was much of a wine connoisseur, but the store clerk had assured me it was a decent choice for the money. My gaze fell on the folder of papers and photos of the new house I'd left on the coffee table. Should I show them to Helvisa and Quinton right away, or was it better to wait to see how the evening would unfold? I still wasn't sure why they were so insistent on this visit. Our meetings had become infrequent and strained over the past few years. They were usually limited to formal Thanksgiving or Christmas dinners, and even then, Helvisa and Quinton always found an excuse to leave early. "I'm sorry, Dad, but we have an important client meeting tomorrow," Helvisa said. "Yeah, Owen, we really have to go," Quinton said with the same fake smile he always gave me. Things had gotten worse since F.A. had died. It was as if the last thread between me and my daughter had been severed with her passing. Elisa called less and less, and her visits became even more formal. I remember how 3 months after the funeral, she came with Quinton to discuss the future. "Daddy, Quinton and I think you should sell the house," she said. "Then it's too big for one person, and you can't manage to maintain it." "Yes," Owen Quinton interject. "Real estate is going up in value right now. You could make a good profit on the sale and then maybe consider moving to a comfortable retirement community." "I'm only 70 years old," I objected at the time. "And I'm perfectly capable of taking care of the house." "Don't be stubborn, Dad." Elisa rolled her eyes the way she had when she was a teenager. "We'd care about you." I didn't argue then. I just said I'd think about it. They took that as a victory and left satisfied, and I stayed in my too big house for another 6 years. I turned away from the window and walked to the tiny bathroom. The mirror reflected my face, the gray hair, the wrinkles around my eyes, the deep creases around my mouth, the face of a man who had lived a long life. I thought about what F.A. would say about my current plan. "You've always been too soft on her, Owen." She'd probably shake her head. But sometimes people need to be taught a lesson. Faye has always been more pragmatic than me. Perhaps that's why our marriage lasted 46 years. She balanced my dreaminess with her practicality. When I got carried away with new projects, forgetting the mundane, she would bring me back down to earth. When I doubted my abilities, she gave me confidence. I remember when in 2010, my department was about to be downsized due to budget constraints. I was 61 years old, 4 years away from retirement, and the prospect of looking for a new job at that age scared me. "Don't panic," Faith said. Then you have appetent, you have savings. We won't be lost. She was right. In the end, there was no downsizing, and I worked well into retirement. But her words always kept me calm in difficult situations. I walked out of the bathroom and back into the living room. My gaze fell on a box of family albums I hadn't gotten around to sorting through yet. I pulled out one of them, a dark blue one, with ragged corners. Inside were pictures of Helvisa from infancy through college graduation. Here she was, newborn, in the arms of a happy fae. Here she is taking her first steps, clutching at my fingers. Here she is walking to first grade with a Huggy backpack on her back. And here is her 16th birthday. In this picture, she is no longer smiling so carefree. There's something calculating, evaluating in her gaze. I remember that day. Fa and I gave her a gold bracelet with a small sapphire, her birthstone. Helvisa looked disappointedly at the gift. "Thank you," she said without enthusiasm. "It's beautiful." And then she was gloomy and taciturn all evening. I found out later that she was expecting a car as a present, like many of her classmates. F.A. and I decided at the time that 17 was a more appropriate age for such a serious gift. Plus, we were having financial difficulties due to F.A.'s father's medical bills. As I turned the pages of the album further, I watched my daughter change. Hi. School graduation, university entrance, university graduation. In each successive photo, her smile became more strained, her gaze more aloof. And then there was Quinton, a graduate of a prestigious business school with perfect hair and a condescending smile. I still remember our first meeting. He shook my hand a little tighter than necessary, keeping his back unnaturally straight as if he'd swallowed a ruler. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Boyd," he said. "Then Helisa has told me so much about you, I doubted it very much." My daughter and I didn't talk much at the time. She was too busy with her new life in the big city, her new job at a marketing agency, her new proper acquaintances. After Quinton came along, things got even worse. He worked as a financial analyst for a large company, and in his own words advised millionaires on investments. Every time he visited, I felt more and more clearly that I wasn't living up to their new standards of living. "Do you still watch cable?" "TV, Owen?" he asked with genuine surprise. "All normal people use streaming services now." Or, "Owen, do you really drive this car? It's over 10 years old. It's just dangerous at your age." Helvisa never burnt him. On the contrary, she often supported these remarks as if ashamed of me lifestyle. "Daddy just doesn't want to change." "Honey," she said, looking at me with pity, "he's always been like that." And then there was the wedding. Lavish, expensive, with 300 guests, most of whom I had seen for the first time in my life. Helvisa insisted that the ceremony be held at the most expensive hotel in Tupelo. Faye was sick at the time, but she was able to attend. Dad, Quinton, and I calculated the budget for the wedding. Helvisa told me 3 months spare the ceremony. We're short about $30,000? $30,000? I couldn't believe my ears. "Helvisa, that's a lot of money." "But you were going to give us a wedding present anyway, weren't you?" She looked at me with that trademark begging look she hadn't used since she was a teenager. "Besides, it would be your only daughter's only wedding." I gave her the money, partly from savings, partly by taking out a loan that neither Helisa nor Faye ever found out about. I paid it off for 2 more years after the wedding. And a year after the wedding came the request for help with the down payment on the house. Helvisa and Quinton found the perfect place in the upscale Tupelo neighborhood. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a pool, a half-acre lot. "Dad, we only need $50,000 for a down payment." Helvisa said we'd save up on our own, but the real estate market is going up so fast. If we miss out on this house now, we'll have to pay a lot more later. By then, F.A. was already seriously ill, and all our savings were going toward her treatment. But I couldn't say no to my daughter. I sold my collection of rare coins, which I had collected all my life, and borrowed some more from my brother. Halisa took the money for granted without even asking where I got it. "You're the best, Daddy," she said, kissing me carelessly on the cheek. "We'll invite you and Mom to the housewarming party as soon as we're settled in." We never got an invitation. Halisa's explanation was that F.A. was too sick to visit, and after her death that I was too immersed in grief. I closed the album and returned it to the box. The clock showed 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 3 more hours until they arrived. I decided to take a walk to clear my head and get rid of the bitterness that these memories always evoked. The neighborhood in which I was temporarily settled was The last box sat heavy in my arms, though I couldn't say why. It wasn't any bigger than the others, but somehow it felt like it carried more than just dishes or books. Maybe it was because I knew this was the last one, the final piece of my old life being brought into this new, smaller chapter. I lowered it gently onto the creaky wooden floor and slowly straightened my back, wincing as a sharp ache ran through my spine. 76 isn't the best age for lifting boxes and moving furniture, especially not on your own. But I didn't have much left to carry anyway. Most of what we owned, what Faye and I had collected over nearly 4 decades, was sold along. With the house on Crescent Avenue, I stood in the middle of the room for a moment, letting my eyes wander across the space. The living room was small and plain, its walls patched with cracked plaster. The kitchen nearby looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1950s, with a tiny stove that might as well belong in a museum. One narrow bedroom. A bathroom just barely big enough to turn around in. Still, it was clean, and it had a roof that didn't leak. This little rented house sat behind the old railroad tracks on the edge of Tupelo, and it looked just like it had when I first came to see it. Modest, a little worn, but it would do for now. 2 months. That's all I needed. As I knelt beside the box and peeled back the flaps, I muttered under my breath, "Why on earth did I sign up for this?" But deep down, I already knew the answer. I needed time. Time between the end of one life and the start of another. Time to think, to breathe, and to figure out what I wanted to do with whatever years I had left. I needed space, physical and emotional, before stepping into something new. Inside the box were dishes, carefully wrapped in newspaper. But under the plates I found 2 picture frames tucked in just the way Faye would have done it. I pulled them out and held them in my hands for a moment before setting them gently on the mantel above the dusty fireplace. The first photo showed Faye on a summer day, her brown hair loose around her shoulders, her smile wide and bright. She was wearing a light dress, the kind she used to love, and behind her shimmered Lake Chattanooga. It was taken in 1987, our 20th wedding anniversary. I stared at that smile, remembering the way she used to laugh, how her eyes crinkled at the corners. The second picture was older still, me, Faye, and little Helvisa, maybe 8 years old, standing outside our Crescent Avenue home. Faye had her arm around our daughter, and I had mine around both of them. My finger traced the edge of the glass frame. "If only you could see what our daughter has turned into, Faye," I whispered. But maybe it was better that she couldn't. Faye passed away 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer didn't give us much time to prepare. It just took her, fast and cruel. After she was gone, everything felt quieter, empty. She was the only one who truly knew me. She never saw me as a walking wallet or a piece of furniture that sat in the corner until someone needed something. She saw the real me, a man with hopes, fears, ideas. After she died, Helvisa started showing up only when she wanted something. Money for a kitchen remodel, funds for a luxury vacation, a down payment for a new car. It was always, "Daddy, you're not going to use the money anyway. Quinton and I need it now." And I gave it to her. Not because I thought she meant it, but because it was easier than arguing, because Faye would have wanted me to. Faye loved our daughter, no matter what. I opened the next box and smiled as I pulled out a whistling kettle old-fashioned with a few dings on the side. Faye had found it at a flea market in Nashville during a weekend trip back in '93. "Look, Owen," she'd said, grinning. "It's just like the one my grandmother had." I remembered how excited she'd been. I set it on the stove gently, like it was made of something more precious than metal. Tupelo was where it all started. We moved here in the '70s. I was a young hydraulic engineer, full of ideas, full of fire. The city brought me on board after a terrible flood ruined the water system. I was tasked with designing something new, something better. Faye believed in me. Halavisa had just been born. We bought that house on Crescent Avenue thinking it would be temporary, just until I got established, but we never left. That house became the backdrop to our entire life. I worked long hours, designing water and sewage systems, solving drainage problems, tackling pollution. In the '80s, I developed a new filtration system, one I was proud of. Several cities adopted it. It brought in good money, but Faye never cared about that. "Let's save for Helvis's education," she'd say. And so we did. Helvisa grew up clever but distant, always chasing more nicer toys, designer clothes, pricey hobbies. I remember her 16th birthday, how furious she was when we didn't buy her a car. "All normal dads buy their daughters a car," she'd yelled. Then there was the day she brought Quinton over. He looked like he walked out of a fashion magazine. Tall, perfect teeth, expensive suit, business school graduate, chasing a future in finance. He glanced around our house like it offended him. "What do you do, Mr. Boyd?" he asked, sizing me up. "I'm a hydraulic engineer," I answered. "Oh," he said, with a smirk. "So kind of like a city plumber?" Helvisa laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. Faye squeezed my hand under the table, her way of saying, "Let it go." So I did. Just like I had time and time again, I turned back to the stove and placed the kettle down. The cold February sky outside was darkening. I had signed the papers for the sale 3 weeks ago. Our home, our 2-story Victorian house, with its wide front porch and blooming magnolias, was now someone else's. A young couple, both doctors, bought it. They seemed nice. The price was fair. But Helvisa? She was livid. "Are you out of your mind? That was our family home. I grew up there." She screamed when I told her. "And yet you once said it was old and too big for a lonely man," I reminded her. "That didn't mean you had to sell it," she snapped. "Quinton and I could have moved in." I nearly laughed. The same Quinton who once mocked the house now wanted to live there? Maybe they thought I'd just die and leave it to them. "They didn't expect me to sell it myself. It's done," I told her. "The house is sold. The paperwork signed. And where are you planning to live? A nursing home?" "No, I've rented a small place for now." She chuckled. "You've come a long way, Dad, from a beautiful home to this dump." I didn't tell her about the patent deal, or that 2 months ago an environmental company paid handsomely for my updated wastewater system. I didn't tell her I'd already picked out my next house. Let her think I'd fallen far. That was fine with me. The kettle began to whistle, pulling me out of my thoughts. I poured the tea and sank into the only chair I'd brought with me, a scratched old thing with wooden arms. It had been with me through every chapter. Faye once called it an extension of myself. Outside, I heard a car pull up. Then the buzz of my phone. My one modern toy, a sleek smartphone, vibrated in my pocket. It was Helvisa. I answered with a sigh. "Hi, Daddy," she said, her voice unusually cheerful. How's the move? Settled in? I'm fine. Well, Quinton and I were thinking maybe we could come visit, see how you're doing. Help you unpack? I almost smiled. Help me? They hadn't offered to lift a finger in years. Not even when I had heart surgery. But I played along. Sure. Come over tomorrow night. I'll cook dinner. Perfect. Oh, and text me your new address? I gave it to her, then hung up. Outside, the mailman was handing a package to a woman in a loud tracksuit. She was talking fast, waving her arms. I turned back to the mantel and looked at Faye's photo. You know, honey, I said softly, maybe we did spoil her too much. Maybe we should have been a bit tougher. The photo, of course, stayed silent. I finished my tea and went back to unpacking. Maybe she was right. I smiled into the darkness of the bedroom and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would be an interesting day. Tomorrow, Heloisa and Quinton would get the lesson they had long deserved. The phone call woke me up at 7 in the morning. It was the realtor, Miss Price, who was handling my new house. Mr. Boyd, good morning. Sorry to call so early, but I have good news. The previous owners have vacated the house earlier than planned. You can move in the day after tomorrow if you did. That's really good news, Miss Price. I stretched, feeling my neck stiffen after a night on an unfamiliar pillow. But let's stick to the original plan. I'll move out in 2 days. As agreed. Whatever you say, Mr. Boyd. I just wanted to make you happy. Thank you, Mr. Boyd. I appreciate your concern. After the call, I couldn't sleep. I got up, took a shower, made some coffee. It was going to be a busy day. I had to buy groceries for dinner, finish unpacking, check the paperwork for the new house again. At the supermarket, I picked out the ingredients for a simple but hearty, typical working-class suburb. Unpretentious one-story houses, shabby cars in the driveways, children playing in the street without supervision. But there was an authenticity to the place that was missing in the sterile rich neighborhoods where Heloisa and Quinton lived. I walked to a small park 2 blocks from my temporary home, sat down on a bench and watched the ducks in the pond. One of them, a large emerald-headed grilling, was aggressively chasing the others, taking away the bread that an elderly woman from a nearby bench was throwing to them. Always the cockiest one gets everything. The woman grumbled, noticing my gaze. As in life, so it is with ducks. I smiled at her and nodded. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd let Heloisa and Quinton be the cheeky selves for too long, taking everything they wanted from me. But today would be different. Tonight, I'm going to teach them a lesson. The only question is how exactly to do it. I could show them pictures of the new house right away. I could present it as a surprise. Look where I'm moving in tomorrow. But then I wouldn't see their true reaction to my current modest home. And I wanted to know what they really thought when they considered that I was broke and forced to live in a hole, as Quinton would surely call the place. Or I could wait until the end of the evening, give them a chance to fully display their arrogance, and then deliver the finale blow by showing them pictures of the $6 million mansion. The second option seemed more tempting. I wanted to see their real faces, hear their unedited comments, and then savor their shock and embarrassment. Isn't that a little petty for someone my age? I muttered aloud, "Excuse me?" A woman from a nearby bench asked. "Just talking to myself?" I smiled. "Old habits." She nodded understandingly and went back to feeding the ducks. I got up from the bench and headed back toward the house. On the way, I pondered what F.A. would say about my plan. She probably wouldn't have approved of such blatant vindictiveness. Faye had always been the best part of me. Kinder, more understanding, more capable of forgiveness. But Faye hasn't been around for 6 years. And in those 6 years, Heloisa and Quinton had done anything to earn my kindness or understanding. They've taken without giving anything in return, not even basic respect. When I got home, I glanced at the clock. Almost 5. It wastes time to start cooking dinner. I took the steaks out of the fridge to let them warm up to room temperature. Washed the potatoes and put them on the boil. Chopped the vegetables for the salad. Cooking always made me feel better. Faye had taught me the basics of cooking back in the early years of our marriage. A man should be able to feed himself, she used to say. After her death, I mastered a few dozen more recipes, experimenting with different cuisines of the world. Quinton once sarcastically remarked that cooking was a strange hobby for a man of your generation. Owen, as if being able to cook had anything to do with generations or gender. At 5:30, I set the table. Nothing fancy. Plain white plates, inexpensive. Wine glasses, simple cutlery, everything clean and neat, but no frills. I didn't want the furnishings to contrast with my humble temporary home. At 5:45, I changed into a clean shirt and pants. Not too formal, but not completely sloppy either. I wanted to look like a man who was coping with life despite limited means. At 5:55, I heard the sound of a car pulling up. Looking out the window, I saw Quentin's brand new black SUV, a luxury car that was probably worth more than a year's rent. On this cabin, I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the evening ahead. They got out of the car, Helivisa in a fancy beige coat and high boots. Quentin in a cashmere coat and a scarf that probably cost as much as a week of my pension. I saw them looking around the neighborhood with distaste, glancing among themselves. Quinton said something and Helivisa responded with a short chuckle. I stepped away from the window and waited for them to knock. When the knock sounded, I counted to 5 before opening the door. Calm, just calm. Helivisa Quinton. I smiled as naturally as possible. Welcome, Daddy. Helivisa kissed my cheek, leaving a lipstick mark that she wiped away with her thumb. How are you? Fine, thanks, Owen. Quinton held out his hand for a handshake. His palm was dry and cold. Interesting place you found. Come on in. I stepped back, letting them inside. Dinner's almost ready. They came in and I closed the door behind them. The show was starting. I watched them look around my humble temporary home, trying to hide their disappointment and shock. Their eyes read something they didn't dare say out loud. At least not yet. Well, I said, heading for the kitchen. Have a seat. I've got the steaks ready. Helivisa lowered herself uncertainly onto the couch, careful not to touch the upholstery more than necessary. Quentin preferred to remain standing, surveying the room with poorly concealed disgust. Do you need help in the kitchen, Daddy? Helivisa asked, and I almost laughed. She'd never once helped me cook in her entire adult life. No thanks, I'm all set. Just need to fry the steaks. I went back to the kitchen and busied myself with the meat, hearing them talking in the living room, thinking I couldn't hear. Did you see the bathroom? Quinton asked in a whisper. There's a boiler right above the toilet. That's a fire hazard. I know, Helivisa replied. I can't imagine what happened to him. He was always so practical. I told you I should have made him sell the house sooner. Quentin sounded annoyed. Then he would have gotten decent money for it. And now what? He's sitting in this dump and he's probably blown through his savings. Well, that's not our problem, said Helivisa. The main thing is that he doesn't start asking us for money. I felt the blood rush to my face. That's why they'd come to see if I was going to be a financial burden on them. I wanted to post pictures of the new house immediately, but I held back. Let the evening run its course. Dinner's ready, I announced, bringing out a plate of steaks. Quinton, could you open the wine, please? The corkscrew is on the table. Quinton took the bottle, twirled it in his hands, and snorted skeptically. Merlot from 2018? Not a good year for Merlot, Owen. What can all be wine experts? I shrugged, setting the plates down. Quentin recently took a sommelier course. Helvisa said proudly, as if it were the greatest achievement of mankind. Now we have a real wine cellar at home. Only 50 bottles of selected wines, Quinton added modestly. It's nothing special. Impressive, I nodded. Please come to the table. We sat down at the small kitchen table. Helvisa and Quinton exchanged glances that I could read perfectly well. God, that's terrible. So, Dad, Helvisa began after them. First sip of wine. How did you end up here? Iman, why did you choose this particular neighborhood? It's temporary housing, I answered, cutting off a piece of steak. A couple months at most. But why? She persisted. You could stay with us. We have a whole guest room that's empty. I could hardly contain a smile. In the 6 years since F.A.'s death, they'd never once asked me to stay with them. Not even when I'd had heart surgery and needed help for a while. I didn't want to embarrass you, I said. Besides, I like having my own space. And then what? Quinton asked, picking carelessly at his plate with his fork. Have you found a permanent place to live yet? Yes, I have. I nodded, not going into details. Something in the same style. Helisa circled the room with her hand. You'll see. I smiled. They looked at each other again. Quinton shook his head slightly as if to say he's useless to talk to. Dad. Helisa placed her hand on top of mine in a supposedly caring gesture. Quinton and I are worried about you. After selling the house, well, we're not sure you're making the right decisions. The right decisions? I raised an eyebrow. Financial decisions, Quinton clarified. You got good money for the house, but where is it? You're renting this place instead of buying something suitable for your age and status. My status? I couldn't hide my smile. And what is my status, Quinton? He hesitated, clearly not expecting a direct question. Well, you are, after all, a former hydrological engineer for the city. A respected man, not exactly wealthy, of course, but not someone who should live in such a dump. Helvisa finished. For him. Seriously, Dad, what happened to the money from the sale of the house? Nothing happened to him, I answered calmly, continuing to eat. They're in my account. Then why are you here? She didn't hide her irritation. Is this some kind of midlife crisis in reverse? Old people usually buy sports cars, not move to. The slums, Helvisa? Quinton shushed her, pretending to be shocked by her rudeness. No, really, she raised her voice. I didn't understand what's going on. First, he sells the family home to some strangers. Then, he moves into this Thistempori. Housing, I reminded her. Dad, she took a deep breath, clearly trying to calm down. I think you need help. Professional help. You mean a psychiatrist? I set aside my fork and knife. Maybe. She nodded. Or at least a financial counselor. Quinton could. I could look at your accounts, Owen. Quinton interjected with that smug smile. I hate it so much. Help structure the assets. Invest what's left. What's left? I looked at him. You think I squandered the money from the sale of the house? Well, looking at this place, he spread his hands. I felt anger building up inside, but I tried to stay calm. It's not time yet. Let them show their true colors. And what would you advise me, Quinton, being a financial advisor? First of all, stop renting this space. He chose his words carefully. Second, buy a small apartment in a decent neighborhood. Maybe one of those assisted living retirement complexes. They're pretty affordable. Affordable? I repeated. So you think that's all I can afford? Well, with your pension as a municipal employee and the money from the sale of your house, he paused. Yes, it would be a reasonable option. What about my patent? I asked, looking him straight in the eye. Your patent? Quinton frowned. What? Patent? For an industrial effluent filtration system? I took a sip of wine. The one I've told you about several times over the last 20 years. Oh, that. He waved his hand dismissively. Owen, with respect for your professional accomplishments, but these municipal patents are worth next to nothing. They're not technology for Apple or Tesla. For water treatment? Elisa rolled her eyes. Dad, seriously, who needs that? Global echo. For example, I replied calmly. Quinton choked on his wine. Global Eco? An environmental corporation with a capitalization of $40 billion. That's right, I nodded. They bought my patent months ago. There was silence. Elisa and Quinton looked at me in disbelief. How much did they pay? Quinton finally asked, trying to speak casually. 50,000? 100? I pushed my plate away and stood up from table. Let's go into the living room, I suggested. I want to show you something. They followed me, exchanged puzzled glances. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up a file folder. Sit down. Please, I pointed to the couch. They sat down next to me, tense as strings. I opened the folder and pulled out the contract with Global Eco. Here, I handed the document to Quinton. You can take a look at it. You're the financial expert. Quinton took the contract with a via skepticism, but as he read it, his face began to change. His eyes widened. His mouth dropped open. Is this a joke? He raised a stunned look. At me. What is it? Helvisa leaned over, trying to make out the numbers. $8 million, Quinton said in a near whisper. They paid him $8 million for the patent. What? Helvisa snatched the document out of his hands. No way it can. I nodded calmly. Plus royalties from commercial use of the technology for the next 15 years. But why didn't you tell us? Elisa looked at me with an expression like she was seeing me for the first time in her life. Why should I have told you? I shrugged. You've never taken an interest in my work. Even when I tried to talk about my projects, you always changed the subject. But $8 million, Quinton exclaimed. That's a total game changer. Change is what exactly, Quinton? I looked him straight in the eye. Your attitude toward me. He hesitated, not knowing what to say. Dad, Hella intervened. We've always been proud of you and your accomplishments. We just didn't realize that your work could be so valuable. Valuable, I repeated. Interesting choice of word. I took the pictures of the new house out of the folder and put them on the table in front of them. And this, I said, is the permanent home I was talking about. They stared at the pictures. The glossy pictures showed a luxurious colonial-style mansion, a grand facade with columns, a manicured garden, a swimming pool, a tennis court. Did you? You bought it? Elisa couldn't take her eyes off the pictures. Yes, it nodded. For $6 million. I'm moving in tomorrow? $6 million? Quinton seemed stunned. But then why are you living here? Because the previous owners were finishing up their business and vacating the house, I explained. I needed somewhere to live for the 2 months between selling the old house and moving into the new one. Elisa and Quinton exchanged looks of confusion, shock, and something else calculation. That's amazing, Daddy. Helvisa suddenly broke into a wide smile. We're so happy for you. Why didn't you tell? US sooner? We would have helped you with the move. Yes, Owen, Quinton said, his voice unnaturally friendly. It's a great house. What neighborhood is it in? Oakwood Hills, I answered. Oakwood Hills. Quinton couldn't hide his envy. It's the most exclusive neighborhood in Tequila. I know, I nodded. That's why Icho said, Daddy. Elisa put her hand on my shoulder. This is great. We shall definitely celebrate your move. Maybe we could have a housewarming party. Quinton and I will organize everything. I looked at her, then at Quinton. Their faces radiated fake enthusiasm and poorly concealed greed. 10 minutes ago, they'd thought I was an old loser who couldn't handle my finances. But now, when they found out about my sudden wealth, they suddenly became caring and attentive. You know, I slowly gathered up the photos and returned them to Theffolder. I don't think I'm going to have a housewarming party. But why? Halissa looked genuinely surprised. It's such a wonderful occasion. You see, Helvisa, it looked her straight in the eye. I prefer to share joyful moments with people who are with me, not only in good times, but also in bad. Her face froze. What do you mean by that? I mean, I paused that 10 minutes ago you were both sitting at my desk looking at me with disdain and calling this place in a hole. Quentin was suggesting I buy an affordable retirement apartment, and you, Helvisa, were insinuating that I needed psychiatric help. Daddy, we were just worried about you, she exclaimed. No, I shook my head. You were worried that I might ask you for money. Helvisa, you heard your conversation when I was in the kitchen. She turned pale. That's not what we meant. That's exactly what I said. I interrupted her. Both of you have always treated me like an ATM when you needed money and like a burden when you didn't. You were never interested in my life, my projects, my accomplishments. To you, I was just an old loser living in the past. Owen. Quentin intervened. I think you're over-dramatizing the situation. We've always treated you with respect. Respect? I couldn't contain my laughter. Quentin, the first time we met, you called me a city plumber. Is that your idea of respect? He blushed and looked away. It was just a joke. No, I shook my head again. It wasn't a joke. It was your true attitude toward me. And today, you both showed it to the fullest. Halissa looked like she was ready to cry. But I knew my daughter. They were not tears of remorse, but tears of frustration and anger. I don't know what's gotten into you, Daddy, she said in a shaky voice. We came to see you, and you've given us this spectacle. Apple? I raised an eyebrow. No, you made a spectacle of it when you stepped into this house. Your glances, your remarks, your disdain, all of it was an act. So you lured us here on purpose. There was an accusatory note in her voice, to make fun of us, to humiliate us. I didn't lure anyone, I countered. You insisted on coming here, and I just wanted to see who you'd become. And who do you think we've become? She crossed her arms across her chest. People who judge others solely on their financial status, I answered. People who only care about what can be measured in dollars. You both sat here and looked at me like I was nothing because you thought I was poor. That's not true, Helvisa exclaimed. Isn't it? I raised an eyebrow. Then why did your attitude change so dramatically when you found out about the $8 million? Why did you suddenly want to throw a housewarming party and help with theme of? They were silent, not knowing what to say. You know, I continued after a pause. When I sold our family home, I felt guilty. I thought I was depriving Yelisa of part of her inheritance, of the place where she grew up. But now I realize I did the right thing. To you, the house on Crescent Avenue was just real estate, an asset that could be converted into money. For Faye. And me, it was a home filled with memories and love. At the mention of Faye, Helvisa shuddered. Leave Mom out of this, she said quietly. She would never approve of what you're doing now. You're right, I nodded. Fi was kinder and more tolerant than I was. She always saw the good in you, even when you were being selfish. But you know what? You think even her patience had limits. And today, you both crossed them. Quentin stood up, clearly feeling uncomfortable. I think we'd better leave, he said, trying to maintain his dignity. You're obviously not in the mood for constructive dialogue. Obviously, I agreed. Helvisa stood up too, her face pale with anger. You're going to regret this, Daddy, she said. You can't just cut us out of your life. I'm not cutting anyone out, Helvisa, I replied. I'm just finally seeing you both for who you really are. And you know what? I don't like what I saw. They stood before me, my only daughter and her husband, and I could see the shock, confusion, hurt, and anger on their faces, but not an ounce of remorse or understanding. I'm moving into a new house tomorrow, I said, standing up. And I'm starting a new chapter of my life. You can be a part of it, but only on my terms. And my condition is respect. Real respect, not the kind that comes only at the sight of money. Heloisa shook her head. You've changed, Dad. I don't recognize. You? No, Helisa. I looked into her eyes. You're the one who's changed. You and Quinton, and I'm just finaliseing things. Quinton took Helisa's hand. Come on, darling. There's no point in continuing this conversation. I walked them to the door. Helisa turned around on the threshold, her eyes full of tears. It's all about the money, isn't it? She asked. Do y'all think you can do and say whatever you want just because you're rich now? No. Heloisa, I shook my head. It's all because of the truth. The money just helped me see it. I closed the door behind them and leaned my back against it. From the window, I watched them walk to their car, Quinton saying something furiously. Helisa, wiping away tears. They got into the car and drove away without even looking back. I went back into the living room and picked up Fa's picture. You were right, sweetheart, I said out loud. Sometimes people do need to be taught a lesson. I put the picture back on the mantelpiece and walked over to the window. It was getting dark outside, and in the light of the street lamps I could see the occasional snowflake falling. Tomorrow would start a new day. I woke up with first rays of the sun. Outside the window was quiet and empty. Only the wet asphalt. After the night rain glistened in the morning light. Moving day had finally arrived. Last night had left a strange aftertaste. I felt neither triumph nor regret, only a quiet certainty that I had done the right thing. Perhaps I should have done it much sooner, shown Helisa and Quinton the mirror that reflected their true faces, but as far as to say, all in good time. I brewed some coffee and sat down in my old chair, which would be moving to its new home very soon. There wasn't much stuff, only 10 boxes, not counting the furniture. Most of my possessions had been stored in a warehouse after the sale of the old house. And today, the movers were supposed to deliver everything straight to the new mansion. The phone vibrated. A message from Heloisa. Dad, we need to talk. Please call me back. I set the phone aside without swearing. Predictable. I knew she was going to try to patch things up, especially now that she found out about me money, but I wasn't ready for this conversation. Not today. At 8 o'clock in the morning, a small truck arrived to transport my belongings. 2 uniformed young men quickly loaded my boxes and some furniture. One of them, with tattoos on his forearms, handled the old chair respectfully as if he understood its value to me. Is this the last one, Mr. Boyd? He asked, closing the truck doors. Yes, thank you. I looked around the house one last time. The empty room seemed even smaller without furniture. I handed the keys to the manager, a scowling middle-aged man in a worn jacket, and got into my car. A truckload of stuff was supposed to meet me at the new house. The phone vibrated again. This time, it rang. Heloisa. I pressed reject and pulled into the driveway. The drive to Oakwood Hills took about 40 minutes. I drove through downtown Tupelo, past the park where Fa and I often walked on Sundays, past the elementary school where Helvetia went, past the city hall where I'd worked most of my life. The city that had become my home half a century ago now looked both familiar and foreign at the same time. My old car, a 12-year-old Ford, looked out awfully on the wide streets of Oakwood Hills with its immaculately mowed lawns and stately mansions. But that would soon change. The new car was waiting for him at the dealership, and I planned to pick it up next week. The navigator led into the gate that opened the driveway to my new home. I entered a code into the control panel, and the gate slowly opened. The driveway lined with young oaks led to a two-story colonial-style mansion. The white columns, the wide porch, the impeccable facade. It looked exactly as it had in the photographs, but in reality it was even more impressive. The phone rang again. I sighed and decided to answer it. It was better to end it now. "Daddy," Eliza's voice sounded, unusually soft. "Finally. I've been trying to reach you all day. I've been busy moving," I answered, parking in front of the house. "I understand." Her voice sounded carefree. "How's it going? Do you need any help?" "No, thanks." "I have movers, Dad. Shep asked. I wanted to apologize for yesterday. Quinton and I talked it over and we realized we were wrong." "You did?" I got out of the car, phone clutched between my ear and shoulder as I retrieved my briefcase from the back seat. "Yes," she sounded almost sincere. "We shouldn't have judged your choices. It's your life and you have the right to use it however you want. Thank you for understanding." I walked up the steps to the front door where Miss Price, the realtor, was waiting for me. "Daddy, Quinton and I would like to come over tonight." Elisa continued to help you get settled in, get acquainted with your new home. That was it. Of course, she couldn't wait to see the $6 million mansion. "I can't today, Eloisa," I replied. "I'll be busy unpacking and meeting the neighbors. Maybe some other time." "But Dad, sorry, I have to go." I ended the call and tucked my phone into my pocket. Miss Price, a slender woman in her 40s and an impeccable business suit, smiled and handed me the keys. "Welcome to your new home, Mr. Boyd." I took the keys and felt their weight in my hand. A symbolic mint, the beginning of a new life. "Thank you." "Miss Price, is everything ready for me to move in?" "Absolutely," she nodded. "All the paperwork's done. The house is all cleaned and ready. Would you like me to take you inside?" We entered a spacious hall with a marble floor and a spiral staircase leading to the second floor. High ceilings, large windows that filled the space with light. Everything looked grand and cozy at the same time. "This is the living room." Miss Price pointed to a large room on the right. "The fireplace is working, so you can use it on cold evenings." We walked around the first floor. The dining room with a long mahogany table. The kitchen with modern appliances. The library with built-in bookcases. The study overlooking the backyard where the pool and tennis court were located. "Here come the movers," Miss Price remarked as she looked out the window at the truck pulling up with my belongings. I watched as the young men began to unload my humble belongings, and I couldn't help noticing the contrast between them and the luxury of the new house. My old armchair, the shabby boxy soft books, the simple dishes, all seemed out of place within these walls. But at the same time, these were the things that made the house mine. They carried history, memories, a part of myself. There are 6 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms on the second floor. Miss Price continued as we climbed the stairs. The master bedroom with a walk-in closet and private bath is in the east wing. The phone vibrated again. A message from Eloisa. "Daddy, please don't be so stubborn. We really want to make up. Quinton feels terrible about yesterday." I ignored the message and continued looking around. "All the systems in the house are automated," Miss Price explained, showing me a control panel in the hallway. "From here, you can control flights, the temperature, the security system. There's also a mobile app for remote access. I'm afraid I'm going to need help with that," I admitted. "Modern technology isn't my strong suit." "Don't worry, Mr. Boyd," she smiled. "We can arrange a visit from a specialist who can set up and explain everything." We returned to the first floor where the movers were already arranging my furniture according to my instructions. The old chair took its place by the fireplace in the living room. My desk was in the study. I decided to put Faye's pictures all over the house so I could feel her presence in every room. The phone rang again. This time it was Quinton. I dropped Faringer and muted the sound. Their insistence was becoming intrusive. "How do you plan to set up the rest of the rooms?" Miss Price asked, watching the movers. "There's quite a lot of space here for one person." "I'm thinking of filling it in gradually," I answered. "I might leave some of the rooms empty for a while. I don't want to rush into buying furniture just to fill the space." "That's wise," she nodded. "If you need recommendations for interior designers, I can suggest some names. Thank you. Perhaps I'll take you up on your offer later." Miss Price left around noon, leaving me with all the necessary paperwork and support contacts. The movers finished their work by 2 p.m., and I was left alone in the huge house that was now mine. I walked to the study and sat down at my old desk. I took Fa's picture out of my briefcase and put it in its usual place on the right. I looked out the window at the immaculate lawn and the gazebo in the far corner off the garden. It was all mine now. It was a strange feeling. The phone vibrated again, this time a message. "Dad, we're coming to see you. We really need Taduk. Hella visa, of course." I decided to reply, "I'm not ready to meet today. Please respect my desire to be alone on moving day." The reply came instantly. "We're on our way. We'll be there in 20 minutes. Typical of Hella Visa to ignore me wishes and do as she sees fit. I sighed and typed, "I won't be home. I have a meeting with my neighbors." It was a lie, but the only way to avoid an unwanted visit. I didn't want to see their fake apologies and feigned concern. Not today. Today was my day, the start of my new life. I decided to actually walk around the neighborhood and get to know my neighbors. I needed to do it anyway sooner or later. I changed into more presentable clothes, navy blue pants and a light blue shirt that F.A. had given me for our last birthday together. As I left the house, I saw an elderly couple strolling along the path nearby. A man about my age with a military bearing and a woman, elegant with silver hair in a neat bun. "Good afternoon," I said, coming closer. "I'm Owen Boyd, just moved in." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Boyd." The man shook my hand firmly. "Walter Hammond, and this is my wife Elizabeth. We live in the house with the green roof, the third one from here." "Nice to meet you," Elizabeth smiled. "Welcome to Oakwood Hills. Did you move alone or with your family?" "Alone," I answered. "My wife died 6 years ago." "Oh, I'm sorry," she said sincerely. "It's a tough loss." "Yes," I nodded. "But life goes on." "That's right." Walter nodded approvingly. "What do you do, Mr. Boyd, if it's no secret?" "I'm a retired hydrologic engineer. I used to design water systems for the city and surrounding areas." "A serious profession," Walter said respectfully. "I'm a former military engineer myself, so we're colleagues in a way." We talked for a few more minutes. The Hammonds were pleasant people without the pretension and arrogance associated with wealth. They invited me to a barbecue the following weekend to introduce me to other neighbors, and I gladly accepted. After saying goodbye to them, I continued my walk through the neighborhood. Wide streets, manicured front gardens, and friendly nods from passers-by all made me feel comfortable and safe. I didn't feel like a stranger here, as I had feared at first. Back home, I saw Quinton's car at the gate. They had come after all, despite my request. I went to the gate, but I didn't open it. "Daddy." Elisa jumped out of the car when she saw me. "Finally, we've been waiting here for half an hour." "I told you I'd babysee," I replied calmly. "We just wanted to make sure you were all right." Shattered to smile, but it was unconvincing. "And to help you get settled in, Quinton got out of the car, too. He was wearing an expensive suit, like he was going to a business meeting, not helping with theme of." "Owen," he nodded. "Impressive place." I didn't expect you to be so scope. Yes, Dad, Elisa said. The house is amazing. Aren't you going to let us in to see it? I looked at them, my daughter and her husband, standing outside the gates of my new home with ill-concealed curiosity and greed in their eyes. They hadn't changed from yesterday. Their apology was as phony as their concern. Not today, I answered firmly. I just moved and I want to be alone. Let's meet in a week when I'm settled in. But Dad, Heloisa, I interrupted her. Please respect my wishes, just this once. She looked hurt, but Quinton put a hand on her shoulder. Of course, Owen, he said with feigned understanding. We respect your space. Just let me know when you're ready for a visit. I will. I nodded, not specifying exactly when that would be. They reluctantly got into the car and drove away. I watched them go, feeling strangely relieved. For the first time in a long time, I was doing what I thought was right without guilt or obligation. Back at the house, I spent the rest of the day unpacking boxes and arranging things. By late afternoon, most of the rooms were still empty, but his study, living room, and master bedroom looked settled. My books took up shelves in the library. My photographs took up space on the mantelpiece and walls. I ordered dinner from an Italian restaurant, a luxury I'd rarely allowed myself before, and sat in my old chair by the fireplace with a glass of good whiskey. The fire crackled, casting warm reflections on the walls and furniture. It was dark outside the window, and I could see the lights of the neighboring houses flickering in the darkness like beacons. The phone vibrated again, a message from Helvisa. Dad, we really want to make things work. Please give us a chance. I set the phone aside without answering. Perhaps in the future, we will indeed have a relationship, but it will be a new relationship, based on mutual respect, not self-interest and condescension, and it will be my decision, not theirs. I raised my glass and mentally toasted to a new beginning, to the life I had chosen for myself, to a future that was bright and promising despite my age. For the first time in years, I felt truly free, and that feeling was priceless. March in Tupelo was surprisingly warm. The apple trees in my orchard were soft pink, and the lawn, which a month ago had looked faded, was now a lush green. I sat on the veranda of my new house, enjoying my morning coffee and the silence. It had been exactly a month since I'd moved to Oakwood Hills, and in that time, my mansion had gone from being just an expensive piece of real estate to a real home. I was pulling family heirlooms out of boxes, hanging paintings that F.A. and I had collected over the years, organizing books on the library shelves. The new furniture ordered from a local cabinet maker fit perfectly. But most importantly, I brought the cozy atmosphere that F.A. had created in our old home. Good morning, Owen. Elizabeth Hammond's voice snapped me out of my musings. She was walking down the path to my house, carrying a basket covered with a plaid napkin. I brought fresh baked goods. Yesterday, I experimented with a recipe for blueberry muffins. Elizabeth, you spoil me. I smiled, walking up to her. Come on in. The coffee's just ready. Over the course of that month, the Hammonds had become my true friends. Walter, a former military engineer, shared my interest in technical innovation, and Elizabeth, a retired literature teacher, was a great conversationalist on everything from classical poetry to contemporary politics. We settled into the living room, where the sunlight streaming in through the tall windows created a cozy atmosphere. How is your project with the Clean Water Fund going? Elizabeth asked, pouring coffee into cups. Quite successfully, I answered. Yesterday, I met with representatives of ecosystems. They were interested in my idea to invest in developing affordable filters for developing countries. After moving, I decided it was time to use my knowledge and financial resources for something more than just a comfortable age. A patent on an industrial effluent filtration system brought Mennett only money, but also connections in the environmental field. I started meeting with various foundations and companies proposing investments in social projects related to water purification and sanitation in poor regions. That's wonderful. Elizabeth nodded approvingly. Walter said that your system can be adapted to even the most primitive conditions. Yes, that's where its value lies. I took a bite of the muffin. Incredibly delicious, by the way. Thank you, Shesmild. Speaking of projects, you know who I met at the store yesterday? Your daughter. I tensed up. I'd seen Halisa only twice in the past month. Once we'd run into each other at the supermarket, and the second time she'd come with Quinton for tea. Both visits took place in a strained atmosphere of fake politeness. They admired the house, asked about my plans, but I felt that behind these questions was only a desire to find out exactly how I was going to dispose of my new fortune. How is she? I asked, trying to sound neutral. Outwardly the same, Elizabeth said, choosing her words carefully. But you know, she was talking to Martha Jenkins, the lady from the house with the columns on the corner, and I happened to overhear part of their conversation. Elizabeth faltered, clearly not wanting to be the bearer of bad news. Elizabeth, it's okay, I encouraged her. Whatever you heard, I prefer to know the truth. She told Martha she was worried about you. Elizabeth began that since your wife's death, you've been, as she put it, a little out of sorts. That you'd sold the family home, bought this mansion, and were now recklessly spending the family inheritance on some dubious environmental project. I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. Family. Inheritance? That's my money earned by my labor. Money she had always thought was inadequate. In my profession, unworthy of respect. I thought that wasn't true. Elizabeth nodded, but Martha seemed to believe it. And I'm afraid she's not the only one. You heard similar talk at the bridge club. So, Halisa and Quinton are spreading rumors about me. I shook my head. I can't say I'm surprised. I'm sorry, Owen. Elizabeth touched my arm in a gesture of support. Children can be so painful, you know, Elizabeth. I looked out the window at the blossoming garden. I had long ago given up expecting daughterly love from Helvisa, but I still hoped for at least a basic respect. Maybe in time, she began. Maybe, interrupted her, not wanting to discuss the subject further. Tell me, how is the organization of the charity concert going? You're on the committee, aren't you? Elizabeth tactfully supported the change of topic, and we spent the next hour discussing the upcoming concert and support of the local music school. I offered to co-sponsor the event, which clearly pleased Elizabeth. After Shelift, I decided to take a walk around the garden. The gardener I had hired shortly after I moved in had transformed the neglected plot into a real park with a rose garden, a Japanese corner with a pond, and a gazebo surrounded by climbing plants. Here I spent many horse riding or just watching the birds and squirrels. But today, the beauty of the garden did not bring the usual peace. Elizabeth's words about the rumors spread by Helvisa kept me uneasy. Not that I was surprised. I knew my daughter well enough to anticipate such a reaction, but it still hurt. I went back into the house and sat down at the desk in the study, pulled out the picture of F.A. that always stood to the right of my day planner. What would you say now, sweetheart? I asked aloud. You always believed that there was a good heart in Helvisa, that she was just lost under the influence of Quinton and his values. But it's been so many years. Faye, of course, didn't respond. But I knew Fa saw well that I could imagine her reaction. She had always been an optimist, always believed in the best in people, but even she had her own concept of justice. It pulled from my desk drawer a folder of documents I'd been meaning to study for a long time. My will made while F.A. was still alive when Heloisa had been our only child and natural heir. Now, in light of everything that had happened, I realized it needed to be changed. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The number for Brooks and Associates, the law firm I'd recently started working with, Mr. Boyd James Brooks. He wanted to let you know that the documents for the foundation are almost ready. We need to finalize a few details if you have time today. Yes, of course, I replied. I can come by your office this afternoon. Great. One more thing. You mentioned a possible change in fuel. Would you like to discuss that today? I looked at the file in front of me. Yes, I think it would be a good time. We made an appointment for 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I hung up the phone. A decision that had recently seemed difficult now seemed the only right one. I was setting up a charitable foundation to support young engineers specializing in environmental projects. And it was this foundation, not Helvisa, that was to be my main heir. At 2 o'clock I parked Minu car, a sleek, dark graphite-colored sedan, outside the Brooks and Associate office in downtown Tupelo. James Brooks, an energetic man in his 50s, met me in his spacious office overlooking the city park. Mr. Boyd, good to see you. Hess hooked my hand firmly. Have a seat. Would you like some coffee? No, thank you. It took a seat in the leather chair across from his desk. Let's get right to it. How's the foundation coming along? Everything is going according to plan. Brooks opened a folder with documents. We have prepared the charter, definite management structure as you asked. It'll be called the F.A. Boyd Clean Water Fund. Unless you've changed your mind. No, it's still the name. I nodded. F.A. has always supported my environmental projects. This will be the best way to honor her memory. Great. Brooks made a note in the paperwork. Now for the financing. You were talking about a down payment of $2 million. Yes, but now I want to raise it to $3 million. I interrupted him. And I'll Soplin to amend my will so that when I die, the bulk of my estate will also go to the foundation. Brooks raised his eyebrows, but quickly returned to a professional expression. Of course, that's your right. But let me be clear. You have a daughter, right? You don't plan to leave her an inheritance? I do, but in a limited amount, I answered. Helisa will receive a sum of money and the house on Crescent Avenue, which is now rented out. It would provide her with a comfortable life, but the bulk off money would go to charity. Brooks nodded, making notes. I see. In that case, we'll need to be very careful with the wording to avoid possible future challenges to the will. Your daughter may not agree with your decision. Yes, I understand that. I looked out the window at the city park, where young mothers were walking with their babies in strollers. But this is my final decision. I want my money to do some real good, not just increase Helivisa and Quentin's bank account. We spent the next 2 hours discussing the details of setting up the fund and changes to the will. Brooks proved to be excellent, offering thoughtful solutions to each issue. By the end of the meeting, I had a clear idea of how the foundation would operate and exactly how my inheritance would be distributed. Prepare all fee necessary documents, I said as I stood up. I'll sign them next week. Of course, Mr. Boyd. Brooks walked me to the door. Let me say that I admire your decision. Not many people use their means for such a noble cause. I shook his hand and left the office with a sense of accomplishment. The decision had been made, and I had no doubts or regrets. In the evening, I invited the Hammonds to dinner. The chef I'd hired for special occasions had prepared a gourmet meal, and I pulled a bottle of fine Bordeaux from the wine cellar. To new beginnings, Walter raised his glass. And to old friendships. To new beginnings, I echoed, feeling the warmth of the wine and the good company. After dinner, we went into the living room where the fireplace created a cozy atmosphere. Elizabeth was looking at the new painting on the wall, a watercolor of Lake Chattanooga, where Fa and I had spent our honeymoon. "Beautiful work," she remarked. "A local artist?" "Yes," I nodded. "A young girl just out of art school. I met her at an exhibition at the City Gallery." "You're becoming a real patron of the arts, Owen," Walter smiled. "First the foundation, now supporting young artists." "Just trying to make the best of my opportunities," I shrugged. "Besides, this painting reminds me of happy times with Faye. She'd be proud of you," Elizabeth said softly. "Of what you're doing now?" "I hope so." I looked at the picture of Faye on the mantelpiece. "I hope so." When the Hammonds left, I sat by the fireplace for a long time, reflecting on the past month. Life had changed so rapidly that sometimes I woke up in the middle of the night feeling as if it were all just a dream. A luxurious house, new friends, charity projects. It all seemed so far from my former life as a hydrological engine living from paycheck to paycheck. But the main change happened inside me. I no longer felt obliged to conform to someone else's expectations or tolerate neglect just because that is thus way it is or its family. I finally began to live for myself, guided by my own values and desires. The next morning, I woke up at first light, feeling unusually light. I went down to the kitchen, made coffee, and stepped out onto the veranda with a cup. The day promised to be warm and clear. My phone vibrated in my robe pocket. A message from Hella Visa. "Dad, Quinton and I want to invite you to dinner on Saturday." "There's some important news." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to just ignore the message, as I'd done more than once this month, but the other part was curious. What important news were they trying to tell me? Another attempt at manipulation, or really something meaningful? In the end, I decided to reply, "Thanks for the invitation, but I already have plans for Saturday. Maybe another time." It was true. I had plans to attend a benefit concert with the Hammonds on Saturday, but even if I had been free, I'm not sure I would have accepted their invitation. The memorias off the rumors they'd spread about me were too fresh. The answer came almost instantly. "Please, Dad, it's really important. We can come to your place if it's more convenient for you." Their insistency intrigued me. What could be so important? "Okay," I wrote after a pause. "Come by Sunday by 6 p.m. "Thanks. We will," Helvisa replied, adding a heart emoji, which seemed inappropriate to me after everything that had happened. I put my phone away and went back to contemplating the garden. Whatever happened on Sunday, it wouldn't change my mind about the will and the foundation. Too much had happened. Too much had been said and done to just go back to the way things were. On Friday, I signed all the documents in James Brooks' office. The F.A. Boyd Clean Water Fund officially began its existence. Minu will has also been executed and probated. Hella Visa will receive a certain amount of money and the house on Crescent Avenue, but the bulk of my estate will go to the foundation. "Congratulations, Mr. Boyd," Brooks said, shaking my hand. "You've taken an important step. This foundation could make a real difference in a lot of people's lives." "I hope so," I nodded. "And thank you for your help." As I left the office, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if a heavy weight that I had been carrying for many years had been lifted off my shoulders. The decision had been made, the paperwork signed. Now I could move forward without looking back. When I got home, I sat down at the study table and pulled out Faye's picture. "That's it, sweetheart," I said, looking at her smiling face. "That foundation is in place. Your name will be associated with projects that will help thousands of people get access to clean water. I think you'd like that." For a moment, I thought her smile had gotten a little wider. But of course, that was just a play of light. I remembered how Faye and I used to daydream about what we'd do when we're retired. The trips we always talked about but never realized because of her illness. The lake house we wanted to buy but kept putting off. Grandchildren that we hoped to babysit, but hella, Visa always say that career is more important than children. Life didn't go the way we planned. But maybe that's the wisdom of life. Its unpredictability, the twists and turns that we can't foresee. Who would have thought that a humble hydro engineer at 76 would start a new life, establish a charitable foundation, and make new friends among the Oakwood Hills elite? I smiled at my thoughts and closed the file folder. Whatever happened on Sunday, whatever Helvisa and Quinton wanted to tell me, I was ready to hear them out, but not ready to let them manipulate me again or make me feel guilty. I made my decision to end the toxic relationship and start my life over. And for the first time in a long time, that decision didn't make me regret it one bit.